looks like we got our whole panel set up. So I'm really excited to introduce Lauren Steele, who's an associate research specialist at Metropolitan and a data scientist as well. So always great to have a fellow water data scientist and key partner from Metropolitan as part of the data collaborative, and really works with a passion to turn data into policy. And her work focuses on the science and economics of urban and agricultural water use in the Western US. She has her master's from UC Santa Barbara, where she participated in the Sustainable Water Markets program at the Bren School of Environmental Science and Management. So I got a great background and very talented data scientist at Metropolitan. So really excited to have her moderate this next panel. So I'll turn it over to Lauren. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Drew, and good morning, everyone. This is my first Water Solutions Conference and my 5th California Water Data Summit. Traditionally at the Data Summit, we've focused on the important work of improving urban water management, but we haven't talked very much about agricultural and environmental water use, which make up the bulk of water use in California and contribute greatly to our economy. At the same time, partnerships between urban and agricultural agencies are an increasingly important part of how we manage water in the West. So I'd like to take a moment, Elena, if we have the poll available, pop it up on screen. If not, no worries. And wanted to take just a moment to acknowledge that although a lot of us come from the urban water and tech fields, many of us are working with growers and thinking about the ways that we can farm more productively with the increasingly limited water resources that we have. Most of the water that humans use in California goes towards agriculture, we know this, and yet in many cases, our understanding of how much water is used and where is quite poor. And I know from my own work with growers in the Palo Verde Valley that in the ag world, even just measuring the amount of water that's applied to a field can be a real challenge. Unlike in the urban world, we don't usually have precision water meters, and the diversity of agriculture in our state means there's just no one-size-fits-all solution. Our next speaker is Kevin France, who has been pioneering another approach to this. Kevin is the CEO of SWIIM Systems, which is a really quite innovative company that I've had the pleasure of working with, as they've helped my team at Metropolitan with the challenge of managing our farmlands. Under Kevin's leadership, SWIIM has been recognized as a top 25 ag tech company globally by Forbes for 2 consecutive years. And he's led a team of professionals that has grown the company's operations and partnerships with major agricultural stakeholders, including a one-of-a-kind strategic development agreement with the Western Growers Association. He's been involved in many other agricultural development projects, which I don't have time to go into here, but you should go read his full bio because it's quite impressive. Kevin, I hope you're staying cool up there in Colorado, and welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate the introduction. I'm not sure how much of that's, maybe I put too much puff into that, but I guess I appreciate that. Sounds better than it is, I guess, but much appreciated. Appreciate the invite and I appreciate the opportunity to chat a little bit. And Robin, I want to thank you. You gave me a great introduction on ET, consumption, satellite data. I've got some slides in there, but I'll be able to kind of jump around that a little bit, maybe not spend as much time on it. Quite complimentary. Robin, you know, we're happy to be contributing as well on the Open ET. We look at that as a solid source of consumptive use data. So we're hoping to be able to explore that a little bit more here as you guys get your API going. It's great technology. So I appreciate that. So with that, Lauren, thank you. I'm CEO of SWIIM. We are on-farm water accountants. And I guess let's go ahead and go to the next slide. When I was asked to speak a little bit about California data and water and sum it all put together in my head, I was trying to come up with a quote that would resonate with the group. And as normal, I wasn't so eloquent that I could come up with any quote that I would say that would be worth a hoot. But I did remember a quote that was shared with me about 2 years ago from someone else who's significantly smarter. Many of you know him, Dave Puglia, CEO now of Western Growers. We were having lunch in Bakersfield about 2 years ago after we met a couple of growers about use of SWIIM. And he made this comment almost verbatim. An argument over water is an argument over data. It's really, I think he actually said an argument of water over water is really an argument over data. And I sat there and I pondered that for a second. I said, what do you mean, Dave? And he said, you know, with the issues that we have, whether it's sigma around groundwater, surface water deliveries, drought, continued reduction and retraction of water use, without having that data, you're at a loss. It's all about having the data, having usable data, data that can be used to make decisions, but that also can back your position, whether you're a grower, a series of growers, a co-op, or even a GSA or a district. It's all about the data. So that quote resonated with me. Next slide, Lauren, if you would. Thank you. And with that, I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing. We get a little more granular. So what is an on-farm water accountant? Normally in a presentation, I'd ask everyone to raise their hands and those that have an accounting or financial background to step up and admit themselves. But these days, I think being a CPA is almost as bad as being an attorney. So no one may actually raise their hand. But I couldn't see them on the screen anyway. So I'll just assume a couple of you did. Those that have that accounting background, I think this will resonate. We're monitoring water usage the same way your CPA or accountant would be tracking your financial records. And so if you ask your accountant to balance one side of the budget, you know, all of your cash inflows to your account, that would give you some visibility to your accounts, good information, useful, can make decisions. But wouldn't give you a full bank account balance. You'd have a lot of holes in the mix, a lot of assumptions you're making. On the flip side of that, so if you were looking at all your outflows, even if you knew where all your money went, sub-accounts of expenses, again, that gives you some good insight, very important information, better than nothing, and significantly better than some of the data that's in bits and pieces out there. But to balance an actual water budget, we believe you have to have both sides of that entry, that journal entry, to use a financial term. And that's what we do. So we mesh the delivery and consumption reports together. We do use flow data to the field. We get that through a multitude of ways. And then we use consumption data. We use a combination of weather data and satellite data by field. And those reports are audited by our team because they always have holes in them. And so we have to fill in the gaps, and then we provide an audited report the same way your CPA would at the end of the season. So when you mesh delivery and consumption together, you get one more important key component that we believe is important. You take consumption divided into delivery, and you get a percentage. We call it effectively a consumptive use fraction, or the direct driver to irrigation efficiency, right? So if you use SWIIM for 6 months and you find that you're 55% efficient, that means 55% of your water is going to crop growth, ET, consumptive use, to keep it simple, and the rest of the water is going somewhere else. We can help you track where that's going and create improvements based off that baseline. Lauren, next slide, please. Appreciate it. So we spent about 5.5 years with USDA. Our first patent was co-developed with them on this process, and then we created 2 other patents behind that. But this thing's vetted. It was vetted in the field. We used a couple of researchers at Colorado State, Utah State, and a couple of folks from Fresno State under USDA's direction to write papers on it, to vet the technology. So this is something that's been well vetted. Lauren, next slide, please. And as Lauren so eloquently mentioned, Western growers came behind us on this a while ago when they saw the value proposition we were exploring. 10-year strategic development agreement. We have board members on from Western growers, and of course, in the interest of full disclosure, they've made a pretty sizable investment in us. Their position is their growers, representing 60% of the fresh produce in California by scale, need a tool to understand their water usage. It's as simple as that. And if you ask them that, I'm sure they would expound, but that's the bottom line. Lauren, next slide, please. So to my knowledge, we're the only company that fully accounts for the water balance. And if there's one out there, I'd love to hear about them, but I haven't been able to track them down. We provide a statement of water use. So think about your financial or your investment accounts. It's accurate, it's auditable, it's automated, and it's trusted, and it's based on a series of data inputs that we can rely on. Next slide. Sorry, I have to keep saying that, Lauren. What is a water balance? Well, it's keeping track of how much water enters and leaves your field during a season. It's very similar to balancing the checkbook. That's a good analogy. Okay, I'll just put my hand up. Next slide, because we're going to blow through a couple of these quickly. What do we do with the water balance? Lots of things. We can measure best irrigation practices. We can flag irrigation conditions that are up or under where they need to be. Determine when to irrigate, so we can, a lot of the stuff that you heard there with Robin, that's very similar in this case. Monitor water use for regulatory agencies. We're starting now to run some pilots on actually direct reporting diversion flows in some cases. So that's moving along. The more we can take the water accounting out of the grower's hands, who really wants to grow, we're told by our growers, the happier they are. There's agronomic purposes for a water balance, and also benchmarking, SWIIM certification, which we'll talk about later. We'll go to the next slide. Inputs for a water balance, evapotranspiration, biggie. Robin mentioned that in her section. We're also gathering irrigation deliveries, rainfall, field crop size, crop planting, and harvest date. That lets us kind of get more granular, if you will, in the process. And one of the big things, you know, I asked myself here when you were asking me, Lauren, to speak about how do we make this data open? How do we make it accessible? Because we're dealing with data that growers, in some cases, don't want released to the general public, right? It's sensitive information. So how do we do that? So SWIIM's working on ways to use that aggregated, anonymized data for the benefit of our growers in a way it doesn't identify them, but allows them to benefit from having this type of water use data in addition to some of the items that I've mentioned thus far. I don't know if you guys can see on my screen here, a little certification stamp on a pretend orange. Won't rot, that's why I have it in my office. We have growers that are using it for buyer certification. So they're looking for better payments. If they're crop commodity, they're looking to them, to those end buyers within the supply chain to offer better rates, because then those end buyers can say that their water is created or their product is created with less water. So those sorts of things. So we launched the SWIIM certification about 90 days ago. It has picked up significant traction, talking to a lot of folks now on the buy and sell side of the supply chain that wish to push this forward because it's an important component. Lauren? So that's one way we can use that aggregated data, if that makes sense. Accounting for an agricultural water balance is super complex, and I'm not going to go through all the details now. We could write a book on it. I think we actually have written 2 papers on it so far, but we try to keep it simple, because the other thing is water use data. The biggest complaint we hear from growers is they have all these data sets and they don't know what to do with it. It becomes a problem. So you have surface and groundwater, making the available water available to the grower, then it goes to the farm and the field. And we have to deal with the applied and consumed component. Go ahead, Lauren. It's a complex model, and this is how we do it. We gather the pump and gate data, weather and satellite data integrated together. We have the field and crop data into the system, and then we use crop production data, and we can provide these reports to the farm, district, GSA, and or the state. Go ahead, Lauren. Thank you. All starts with monitoring and accounting at a field level. So we take it as granular as we can get it, in some cases block level. All deliveries are monitored, whether it's an open channel or pipe or sprinkler. And then we use a combination of satellite and weather data interconnected to estimate consumption on a per field basis. We aggregate those together, and that's how we get the water balance. Go ahead, Lauren. I'm going to have you hit the space bar 3 times because this is a slow slide. I like to get you to think about SWIIM umbrella. We have infrastructure, pipe, delivery of the plumbing for water. You then have sensors on top of that, and then you have this umbrella that ties into the SWIIM platform. And then SWIIM gathers this data, multi-dimensional, and puts it into the grower's hands in an easy-to-use method. Go ahead, Lauren. Connects with both third-party equipment and our own equipment, so we're data and hardware agnostic. Go ahead, Lauren. And then we produce these delivery reports. They're weekly, and then at the end of the season, our growers are able to get audited reports. It has every delivery. Go ahead, Lauren, hit the next one if you would. Delivery, consumption, and then you have a journal entry, just like you'd see on your bank account, every event showing water in and the balance. Go ahead. This is a great graph. If you look at it, the light green line is the target. The grower sees their delivery, which is in blue, and then the dark green is consumption, and their whole goal is to narrow that line. They have both data sets and they're narrowing the line, they're freeing up consumptive use, and we can tell them to dollars and to volume what that means to their operation. So it's like playing a game. It's like a widget app to the grower. Go ahead, Lauren. Then we put it into a dashboard. We'll go and flip to the next slide. So this is a kind of a visual, average dashboard setup, although it's fully customizable. You have a field, you have that same water balance graph that's scalable here. So you can make it bigger on your screen and see details. Every flow point, we have data, and then you'll notice it's QA/QC, so it's quality checked throughout the season. It always lags the data, but you can see where your data's been corrected and where it needs work and where it's already been cleared. And go ahead, Lauren, hit the next slide if you would. Growers can set alarms. So this red bar shows that this irrigation location is in alarm. It's under budget. So the grower doesn't want to be down here. They don't want to be over here. They want to be right in the middle. And they get a text message, email, some kind of notification through the system at their choice. Go ahead and hit the next slide if you would. Same on the water balance widget. Delivery, consumption. They can set their details on from and to dates, and then they can set alarms behind it too. So it's very easy to understand. Go ahead and hit the next slide if you would. And then the grower can customize their widget. So we give the grower exactly what they need. No more, no less. And then they customize the widgets on their dashboard in a way that makes sense to them. Go ahead, Lauren. We've got about a minute left here. Robin, thank you for talking about consumption. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I will just mention we do use weather data, our own weather station network, and CMIS data to estimate crop evapotranspiration based off of what the engineers say it should be, right? And then on average, 8 to 16 days, we have a satellite flyover that calibrates that curve. Lauren, one more slide if you would. So a good way to visualize it is we're developing this crop curve on weather data, estimate of what the field should be consuming, and then roughly every 8 days, we get an image. If it's above or below that line, we adjust the curve. So having both of those sources of data allows us to get more granular and to the field level. Lauren, last slide, I think. I'm going to leave you with this slide. And the reason why is because looking at just satellite or weather data, we believe looking at both is helpful. Satellite obviously gives you an actual point in time measurement at a particular point in time, but that's what it does. And there's lots of spaces in between. So we believe by using weather data and satellite data, that gets us a little bit more toward what's happening in the field. And this is a good example. ETC here is in blue. This is weather station data. So this is what the crop should be consuming, but then this is what the satellite at this particular point told us should be happening. So there's a whole lot of blue here in this graph that we believe the crop should have been using, but if we weren't using satellite data, we would have missed. And that can show up in a crop water budget. That could show up in a bill. So we believe that using both of those sources is critical. More data comprised and compared against is a good place to be. If you can wrap up the slide, I'll finish up by saying, because I know I'm getting over time on this, is how do you use this data openly? Our biggest challenge with growers is not releasing proprietary data. They're concerned about it. And water use data, as you can imagine, could be a big talking point for them. But using that aggregated anonymized data the same way Google does on my data, Google has accounts with me. They anonymize it. They use it for benchmarking. We can use it for benchmarking, creating irrigation efficiency benchmarks that they can utilize to see what their friends are doing within the region. It can be used to back a trading platform. You have to have good solid data. Robin alluded to that also in her presentation. There's ways you can use that aggregated data that doesn't put the grower at risk, and that's our goal. And with that, I appreciate the time, Lauren. Thanks so much, and thanks to the group for your attention.
All right, thank you so much, Kevin. I've had the chance to look at a lot of SWIIM's data over the last 3 years, and it really is incredibly cool to be able to see individual irrigation events in high resolution. It's giving my team a lot of really good perspective on irrigation behaviors and how you grow different types of crops and different kinds of patterns. So it's really an incredible data set.